Bad defense completely derailed the Giants season in 2022. Going into 2023, looking at the outfield with Conforto and Haniger in the corners, are the Giants set in center field? Can Mike Yastrzemski and Austin Slater handle defensively that center field position? We'll get into it next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, some more mailbag questions. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions on Twitter about a week ago or two. The first one today coming from Mr. Muckle, who says, what do you think about trading Wilmer Flores and Mike Yastrzemski for a legitimate center fielder? And so this is where my little introduction comes from. I wondered to myself what exactly you mean by a legitimate center fielder. I kind of assume you mean defensively. And so I guess I'm going to maybe debunk a myth here that Yastrzemski can't handle center, because from everything I've seen, some people are like, just use the eye test. Well, that's fine if it's the team that you watch every day, but how about all the other 29 teams? You don't always watch every single one of their plays all season long. But, for Yaz, we've seen him, and we've got defensive metrics. And the defensive metrics we're going to look at here: defensive runs saved, career in center field. Mike Yastrzemski has played over 1,000 innings, 1,015 innings. He's got 2,000 innings in right. So he's played center a lot, played right more, left field 421 innings. But in those 1,000 plus innings in center, Mike Yastrzemski has 8 defensive runs saved, plus 8. He has 2 outs above average, and this ultimate zone rating metric, which we read in, I believe it's runs above average, 5.4, plus 5.4 in his career. So overall, he's graded as an above average defensive center fielder in his career. And so, your question, should they trade Yaz and Flores? It's not going to happen. So it's kind of a theoretical question. I just think, this is a team. Did you know that Angel Pagan and Denard Span both graded really poorly defensively in center field? And so, I don't know. I feel like there's a tendency to be tougher on players these days. I don't know. Maybe under the new front office, there's more scrutiny than there was before. I guess as advanced metrics become more widespread and mainstream, people are using them more. So back in the day, we would have been when I was podcasting in 2015 and when Denard Span was horrible defensively in center field, I was talking about how this was a horrible thing and that he needed to move to a corner. And I remember saying all the time, he needs to be platooned. He does not hit lefties. And yet, whenever there was a lefty on the mound, there was Denard Span leading off center field. And it was just such a poor use of the player, in my opinion. And so, these days we see guys who need to be platooned get platooned, and guys who aren't good defensively in a spot. Well, last year, I'll be fair. Last year we saw guys playing too much who were not good defensively at those spots, like trying out Yermin Mercedes in left field. That was just kind of dumb when you looked at it at the time, and when we look back on it, it just was destined to not work well. But anyway, I think Yastrzemski defensively can be fine, if not above average in center field. In right field, by the way, in his career, plus 11 defensive runs saved, plus 4 outs above average, plus 5.4 ultimate zone rating. Again, this is plus 5.4 runs above average per ultimate zone rating. And these are kind of the big 3 metrics that are like the quote unquote advanced metrics for defense in today's day and age. So when we look at, it's not just Yastrzemski, because Yastrzemski in his career against left-handed pitching has been below average offensively, but in his career against right-handed pitching, about 20 points above average offensively. And so this is why we assume a platoon with Austin Slater. But defensively in center field, Austin Slater has played about the same number of innings as Mike Yastrzemski, a little less than 1,000. And he's got -9 defensive runs saved there, and +2 outs above average, and -4.6 runs above average per ultimate zone rating. So outs above average is the one that disagrees. The other two are kind of heavily negative here. But all of that negativity defensively for Slater in center field came last year. And the previous couple years, he graded out positively or kind of neutral by these numbers that had him so negative last year. And that passes the eye test for me. Last year, he just kind of blundered a lot, made some bad throws, bad decisions, just didn't look great out there. I think in 2021, too, there were some communication issues, but that's not reflected in the numbers here. Like where he's the center fielder, and your job when you're the center fielder, if there's a ball kind of in between you and a corner outfielder, you're supposed to take charge. And I just feel like there were times when the players would run into each other, and that's on the center fielder, really. I mean, it's on both of them, but center fielder needs to take charge. That is their job, and I don't know. So I'm a little more concerned about, or I'm going to be a little more watching closely Austin Slater. Can he handle that role again, where, I mean, you don't want Conforto or Haniger in center, so it really looks like Yastrzemski and Slater. And this is where I wonder, this wasn't really your question, but when we're talking about the platoon of Yastrzemski and Slater being the, presumption there, Michael Conforto has almost the same kind of numbers against lefties as Yastrzemski. He's been 6 points below average offensively in his career against left-handed pitching, whereas Mike Yastrzemski has been, I think it's 7 points below average offensively against left-handed pitching. And so the fact that maybe Yastrzemski is going to be that best option in center field, it's not out of the realm of possibility that you see at times, at least. Maybe if Yastrzemski's having a especially strong year, I think that they kind of have the option of platooning Conforto or Yastrzemski, depending on who's hotter. Or it might not be just about handedness, but about who handles the particular pitch types of the particular pitcher that day better. But I just don't think it's 100% guaranteed that the platoon is only with Yastrzemski and Slater. I mean, it would be Slater and a lefty, whether it's Yastrzemski or Conforto. And I think Haniger, there's no question, will not be platooned, because when you look at the career splits, he's been solidly above average against both righties and lefties. But for Conforto, he's been even better than Yaz. I mentioned Yaz against righties, 20 points above average. Well, how about this? Conforto against right-handed pitching in his career, 36 points above average with a 371 on base, 502 slugging, just kind of a monster against right-handed pitching. And so it'll be interesting to see like where the platoon lies. I would assume it's in center because Conforto's kind of more of an established, really good player than Yastrzemski, but Yaz is, because of that defense, and maybe if you view Yastrzemski as a much better defender in center than Slater, which I don't know if they do, then it might make more sense to keep your good defender out there, start Slater in a platoon, like when there's a lefty pitcher on the mound, start Slater instead of Conforto, and then have Conforto come in as soon as there's a righty pitcher. So we'll see. That's just going to be really interesting to follow, but I mean, they have some depth. You mentioned Flores. Like, it's not totally crazy to package Yastrzemski and Flores together, except I don't think they need to. I think Yaz is kind of underrated. People act like he was horrible, but at worst, he's kind of mediocre. And at best, he's been better than that. And so I believe in him moving forward to at least be a solid contributor on this team. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to get into some attendance questions about how can the Giants bring fans back. What do I think is going to be the status of the attendance for 2023? We'll get into it in just a minute. But first, this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Simple tools like screening questions, which I've used myself, and trust me, it is a effective way to kind of weed out what you're looking for. And they make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, here we go. We're going to get to more questions and answers, getting into the attendance a little bit. Political Theory says, what's most important to bring fans back to the park? A, $9 beers. B, Kyle Harrison as a Rookie of the Year candidate. C, being a playoff contender July 1st. It's a tough call for me. I mean, the beer prices, I'm not a beer drinker myself. And so, I'm one of these people who brings like a bottle of water, like a canister, and they have water fountains at the park. And so I never pay for a drink if I go to a game as a fan. And so that never really occurs to me as an issue, but I know it is. But I can't really speak to it. And so I don't know that like lowering the price of beer alone is going to drive thousands more people to the park. Maybe it would. I don't know how much people care about that. Obviously some, but I don't know that it would be more important than being a contender. And then, so I'm kind of waffling between B and C, Kyle Harrison as a Rookie of the Year candidate. I just don't know that a starting pitcher, right? Like, because he would only pitch every 5 days if he's a Rookie of the Year candidate. And so that would only drive people to the park maybe on the games when he's pitching. And so I ultimately think the answer is C, being a playoff contender on July 1st. But as we saw in 2021, which admittedly was a super weird year, with attendance restrictions at the beginning of the year. And then as the season went on, attendance picked up. But even though the Giants were on their way to 107 wins, they still weren't like packing the stadium. And so I think it's got to be a combination of being a contender and also having some young talent show up. And you mentioned that with Harrison, but I think a position player would help even more. But, we saw it with like Lincecum. Before Posey arrived, there was Lincecum and the team started to get good. And so I think you could potentially see something like that. And as we move deeper into the, end stages, hopefully, of the pandemic, I think hopefully things get back to normal somewhat and attendance will pick up. We're going to get more into attendance with this next question. Mick says, over/under on crowd figures at Oracle from last year. Was a tough offseason, but now the dust has settled. Surely everyone can accept things went okay in the end and get behind this team. I think a solid number of fans will still come out and support the team, but I don't see attendance like dramatically picking up versus what it was last year. But what I will say, and I mentioned this at some point in the offseason, maybe early in the offseason, I believe these are final figures from the 2022 season. But so I looked at every team's attendance in 2019, and then I looked in 2022 because 2021 there were attendance restrictions at the beginning of the year, so it wasn't really fair to look at like full season attendance for those years. Basically, this is the last 2 full seasons without any restrictions on attendance. And what's important to note, first I'll say the Giants were down 8.3% from 2.7 million in 2019 to 2.48 million in 2022. So down 8.3%. But did you know, league average decline was 5.8%. So the Giants only declined slightly more than the league average. There were a lot of teams that declined more than the Giants. In fact, the closest team so the Red Sox were technically the closest to the Giants, down 10%. But how about this? The Houston Astros, who won over 100 games in 2022, I believe, and won the World Series with a great, talented team, they were down 6%, and the Giants were down 8%. And so I think like this whole conversation about attendance, we've kind of been living with blinders on, looking at it from one perspective and trying to make something out of it and say, like when they won 107 games, people were like, still, it was boring. the team that they put together, and that's why attendance was down. I don't know, because, I mean, again, I'm looking at 2022 here, not 2021, but a lot of teams, like, for example, this is really interesting. The Phillies, who last year made the playoffs, had a great record after the first couple months of the season, got really hot, from basically May or June on, and ended up making the playoffs and going to the World Series. And they've also got a bunch of stars. That's the thing. People want to say, well, the Giants' attendance is down because they platoon and they don't have, like, star talent. Well, why are the Phillies down 16.5% versus 2019 in 2022 when they've got Bryce Harper and they, in the offseason signed Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos, and they've got JT Realmuto and Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, all these kind of name brand talent players, and a team that was consistently good for the last 4 months of the season somehow was down 16.5%. And you might say, well, that maybe they started from a really high point. No, they drew significantly fewer fans in 2022 than the San Francisco Giants, believe it or not. They drew 2.28 million and the Giants drew 2.48 million. And how about this? The New York Mets, where are they? The New York Mets drew 2.56 million and the Giants drew 2.48 million. So the Giants were close to the Mets, who spent insane amounts of money and have all this star talent, and had a great season. And so it's kind of like a league-wide phenomenon. And so I think we need to kind of tone back the dialogue about explaining that it's because of the roster construction of the Giants that the attendance was down. Maybe that is part of it, but also league-wide, we saw a 6% decline in attendance from the last full season, 2019 to 2022. So your question was over/under on this year. Probably over. I would say over, but maybe not by much. The Giants, I mean, they drew it's not like they were last in the league. They drew over 30,000 fans a game, which, the A's drew under 10,000 fans a game and they were last. So that's obviously pathetic. The A's drew under 1 million fans for the year. And again, the Giants were at about 2.5 million. And so, yeah, 30,000 fans a game. A lot of them road fans. I mean, that's true. When the Dodgers come into town, they would sell out and it would be mostly people wearing blue. And there's fewer intra-division games, but I don't know. I don't think the Yankees don't come to town, but you're going to get some American League teams that want to come visit. San Francisco is a popular destination for fans to travel, and so maybe some of these American League teams. Anyway, I'm going on and on, but I would say over, but I wouldn't expect suddenly the sellout streak is going to start all up again. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, spring training players to look out for. Is there anyone who's going to pop up and become relevant based on their spring training performance? I got a couple names for you, and we'll get into it in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, more questions and answers. The next one coming from Manny, who says, do you have a dark horse prospect that's invited to spring training that could raise his stock? Mine would be Patrick Bailey. Do you agree or disagree? Do you have others? Could you see him possibly leaping over Bart if he has an outstanding spring and Bart continues to struggle? I don't think Bailey is quite at that point where he's going to leap over Bart on the depth chart, but I wouldn't be shocked if at some point Patrick Bailey, as he progresses, if he does get close to the majors and eventually get an opportunity, that he kind of fits the profile more of what this team likes. I mean, in high A last year, Patrick Bailey had a 15% walk rate. He spent the whole year in high A. And man, I mean, a 15% walk rate. He hit just 225 with the batting average, but a 342 on base and, 195 isolated power. Strikeout rate was modest at just 22%. And so I think it's early. Some people kind of gave up on Bailey after a rough 2021, in which he kind of had to be sent down. He struggled in high A and then went down to low A and did really well. But then back in high A in 2022, had a pretty nice year and I believe won the Gold Glove award at that position in that league. And so I don't know that I have anyone I would point to in terms of raising their stock too much in the spring. I think the usual suspects like Von Braun has a chance to really open some eyes, Casey Schmidt as well. But there probably are some, but I don't have any to like name for you. I think Patrick Bailey is an interesting one because he gets slept on a little bit. He was their first round pick in 2020, the year in which they later nabbed Kyle Harrison. So that 2020 draft actually looks kind of strong to me. They got Casey Schmidt as well and some other solid prospects. And so, look, I mean, like I said, Patrick Bailey was in high A and he only played in 83 games. And so he's not going to be in the majors in 2023. And so hopefully, though, he can look like a guy who can debut in 2024, hopefully has another strong year. More of the mold of what this kind of front office values in a hitter than kind of the mold of a Joey Bart, who's like overly aggressive, a lot of kind of in zone swing and miss, not a lot of patience. Bailey, kind of the opposite, borders on passive from what I understand. But anyway, I think that he's someone to watch for sure moving forward. Next question comes from Bay Area Champ, who says, who do you think will have the best offensive season between Haniger, Conforto, or Jock? So this is a tough one because of what I was kind of alluding to earlier about platoons. And so it's kind of hard for me to judge exactly what you mean by the best offensive season. Like, is it a number like weighted runs created plus? Because if it is, it's kind of skewed. Like if it's Jock Peterson, who last year was at like 140 something, meaning his overall offensive production when he was hitting was about 40 something percent above average. But he doesn't face lefties. And so that's much less valuable than someone who does that when they face lefties and righties, because you're not in there as much. And so for Conforto, it also comes down to like, is he going to be platooned or is he not? And for Haniger, the overall numbers might be lower, but the fact that he's facing lefties and righties kind of raises the importance and the value of the player. And so when all is said and done, I mean, I kind of want to say Conforto because he's had some seasons where he's hit lefties. Like I mentioned, he's similar to Yaz in terms of the numbers against lefties, but Yaz has had at times, like in the 2020 quote-unquote season, he was a monster against left-handed pitching, and Conforto's had some success at times as well. And so the fact that Conforto's been so good against righties, better than even Jock, and so Conforto's been better against righties than Jock and better against lefties than Jock. And still, Jock is a kind of dangerous offensive player, but I think Conforto has the potential to be even better. Haniger, the ceiling might be a little bit lower, but the floor is higher in terms of he's going to probably be just solidly above average against lefties and righties. And so it's kind of like a more nuanced answer than it might seem. But if you're looking for like home runs, RBIs and stuff, I don't really know because I don't really pay attention to those numbers. I don't know historically. It's just not something I really generally look at. You know, weighted runs created is about runs created, you know, and so, and there are numbers, you know, the plus makes it kind of scaled to 100 and you can kind of look at a cumulative runs created type of number. And I'm just going to go, at the end of the day with Conforto, but all three I expect to be kind of solidly above average offensive contributors in 2023. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider hitting that subscribe button or leaving a review or rating the show, whatever you can do. Thank you so much in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. Cannot wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.